Moriden Athluan.
The champion of Kinneret. Moriden showed the beauty of nature by finding renewal for the great and glorious Gildergreen of Whiterun, providing a place of worship for all manner of men and mer.
The champion of Dibella, the only man to enter the most sacred places of the temple in Markat and live. He, who found out the Dibellian symbol and returned her to the temple, so that all could hear the will of the great goddess.
The messenger of Mara, whose small words and influence sparked two of the greatest love stories of all time in Skyrim.
Moriden was at the height of his goodly deeds when word reached him of a new threat to Skyrim and its people.
Like the mighty champion of the people he had become, he looked up to the role of the people's champion once again and set off to destroy the vampire threat.
Come closer and hear the story of how he destroyed one of the oldest threats to
Still
man
searching
and
for stories about me, I see. I hate to disappoint you, but this portion of my story, you won't find a single bard who knows what he's talking about. That's fine now. We have time, my friend. I can tell it far better than they can, as they tell it for entertainment, not because it is truth. Because the truth is not what the bards would have you believe. Sons Dusk, 4th Era, 201. What would be the point of returning to the surface without having to scramble around the landscape dodging dragonfire? This one shouted something at me that wasn't a shout, so I assume it was naming itself, telling me the name of the dragon that thought it was about to defeat me, I imagine. It didn't go as Vintaruth imagined it would go, however, and his corpse has joined the long, long list of those who have failed to kill me. It also joined the list of dragons whose soul I have absorbed. A list that is getting steadily longer, I note, with some satisfaction. If the cult of Boethiah is active in the Windhelm area, then chances are that people are vanishing, and people are creating their own theories about why that might be, which means that checking with the innkeeper is the logical choice. I also very much would prefer any other option. My opinion on Elder Earlydawn is not a polite one. I thought that perhaps getting slightly drunk might make it more palatable, so I entered the tavern and, gritting my teeth, ordered the first drink without mentioning the other information I wanted. That was when I was approached by a young man who was stumbling slightly from his own drinks. Without preamble, he challenged me to a drinking contest with a staff as the stakes. Maybe it was the need to get even drunker before talking to Earlydawn, or maybe it was the power I could feel from the staff, power that my sober side was saying I should be paying attention to, but my drunk side couldn't concentrate on enough to really think about it. 3 drinks was the challenge. He finished 2, I finished 3, and then we stumbled out of the tavern, arm in arm. The next thing I remember, I was waking up some hours later. The blackness faded away, and looking around, I recognized where I was, and it was literally the far side of Skyrim. I was in Markarth, in the Temple of Dibella, a place that I had no wish to ever enter again. One of the priestesses saw I was awake and wasted no time in coming over to scold me at the top volume possible. My head throbbed, my mouth was dry, and worse, I didn't remember a single thing she said I had done in the temple. The highlights include something to do with a goat, a marriage, and throwing a tantrum in the temple after being told to stop fondling the statues. I wish I had a memory of that last. Just seeing the incensed look on their faces would have made it worth the effort. Unfortunately, I had no memory of anything she was talking about, and my drinking companion was nowhere to be seen. I asked for at least some clue, but the priestess refused to even discuss it until I had at least straightened up the mess and given an apology. I was sorry. I was sorry I had no memory of messing with their sense of order, but it was enough to convince her. Most of what I said was slurred and completely garbled, but I did keep talking about Rorikstead, so that is where I will need to go. I wonder if I was smart enough to bring my horse with me. I had not brought my horse with me, which means it is likely still outside of Windhelm. I will likely be walking for quite some time, it seems. Oddly, when I exited the temple, it was still dawn. It was even, after I checked with a guard, the same day that it was when I arrived in Windhelm. This raises other questions. How did I get drunk and get to Markarth in less than a couple of hours? This shouldn't be possible. As fast as a horse is, it's not that fast, and based on what the priestess was able to tell me, I've done far more than a couple of hours of drinking and whatever. Something is very off here. Unfortunately, I don't know any way to unravel this situation without following the breadcrumbs. I arrived in Rorikstead, and as I passed by the farm on the west side of the village, I was all but assaulted by one of the farmers. It seemed incoherent babbling at first, ranting about how he was surprised that I would dare show my face in the village again, and making general threats against my life. After I settled him down and could start getting him to make sense, and to utter a complete sentence without managing to sneak in a threat, I pieced together at least a little of what happened. My drinking companion and myself apparently entered the city and kidnapped a goat. A prize-winning goat named Gleda. I have no idea why I would do this, and it gets stranger, as I apparently also sold this goat to a giant. I did have a giant toe on me in the Temple of Dibella. Perhaps the toe came from the giant I sold the goat to? Honestly, I have no idea, but to keep following the trail, I need to get the goat back, which means hunting down the giant in the hills not far away. My usual method for dealing with angry giants is a course of arrow fire from as far away as possible. And I think I may need to use that method if I have the giant's toe. I doubt he parted with it willingly. The thing about a giant is that they are generally not too hard to track. Look for wild animals running away. Look for large patches of smashed down grass. Look for large trees missing limbs. Just follow the signs and you are going to find a giant at the end of them. It may not be the giant I was looking for, but given that they tend to be solitary creatures, I thought it a good bet that the signs I saw would lead me to the one I wanted. When I found him, and it was holding a lead to a goat, I knew I'd found my target. I thought briefly about talking to the giant and trying to buy the goat back, but with what I still think is this giant's toe in my pockets, I didn't think that discussion would go well. Rather than risk it, I took the prudent path of peppering it with arrows until it wasn't moving anymore, then collecting the goat. I'm not sure what's prize-winning about this animal. Worst smell from a cloven-footed animal? But the goat followed me willingly enough when I started making back for Rorikstead. Once we were close enough, the animal all but bolted for its more familiar stomping ground. The owner was far more willing to speak with me, as one might expect. The answers, though, were even more bizarre. I apparently left a note for the owner, most of it too sloppy to read, that said something about repaying Isolde in Whiterun. Joy. I already know she's willing to sell people, so I'm not sure where her lines would stop. So repaying her for something seems like it would be very high on my list of things to make sure I do. I'm really missing my horse about now. This is a good long stretch of walking. I could feel the presence of a Daedric lord getting closer as I walked the roads towards Whiterun, unable to understand why that would be the case. The man I saw walking the road near the Granite Hill Crossroads, however, gave me the answer to that question. When I got my first clear look at him, it was clear that he wasn't well. Anyone else I would expect to be in bed, likely on the verge of death. He saw my reaction, of course, and after I calmed down his understandably offended responses, I was told he was a follower of the Daedric Lord Periite, the Lord of Pestilence. I'd heard that some men would follow him, hoping for abeyance of whatever disease they may be suffering from. Such was the case here. He was the victim of a plague that would have killed him a year or more past otherwise. So why was he here instead of with his brothers? He refused to elaborate much, only to say that their shepherd had lost his way, and that if I was genuinely interested, I could go talk to someone named Kesh up in the Reach mountain ranges. He then pushed past me on his way to wherever it was he had decided to go. I pursed my lips in thought. Azura, Boethiah, Molag Bal, and now Periite, 3 of the 16 or 17 major Daedric lords, all with their attention and efforts centered in Skyrim. Plus the dragons, plus the vampires. Skyrim is a very interesting place just now, it seems. I wonder how much of that is deliberate, or if any of it is at all. It would be one oblivion of a coincidence, but it is at least possible. But if it isn't, just what is going on here? I had thought to find Isolde in the bannered mare, but instead she all but forced me to the side of the road in the marketplace, demanding that I give her the gold she was owed, 500 septums, for a wedding ring. Me. Engaged. The thought alone makes me shiver in a way that is particularly unpleasant. I didn't get a name or even a location of this supposed upcoming wedding. From my replies, Isolde seems to think that it has also been broken off. Though I'm also insulted that she would think it was my fault somehow, I ignored that and managed to get where I supposedly met this fiancé. Witchmist Grove, in Eastmarch. Well, at least the pathing seems to be right, assuming this is the last stop, which I somehow doubt. This entire situation is so strange, so out of character for me. These are not things that I would ever consider doing, not even drunk, which means I must have been so out of it that the merest suggestion would be enough to get me to do something. I have never been that drunk before. Then again, until 2 months ago, I couldn't have afforded to get that drunk. I'll take a couple of hours at Breeze home for a rare nap. I feel the need to for some reason. And then it's off to Eastmarch to find this ring, get it back to Isolde, and see where the trail leads. Also, if I run into Sam, my drinking companion, again, I am definitely going to bash his face in. 15 Sans Dusk, 4th Era, 201. I hadn't needed Isolde's directions to Witchmist Grove. As a native of Eastmarch, the place is well known to us. I hadn't really thought about the implications, however, of the site, not until I was nearly there. And suddenly, I had deep concerns, the kind of concerns that catch up to you out of nowhere when you realize that something truly and terribly awful either had already happened or was just about to. Months ago, in a place called Orphan Rock, I was nearly killed by a hagraven. I'd never liked the things. Nasty, dirty, and generally unpleasant to begin with, my near-death experience as the result of one of them was one of the few things I truly shudder at the thought of. I bring this up because I had suddenly remembered that Witchmist Grove is a known living area for one of the things. And Isolde had mentioned meeting my fiancé there, which meant... With a shudder, I ran the remaining distance to the grove, approaching as quietly and stealthily as I could manage, hoping against hope that there was some young woman there who was the hagraven's captive, because the alternative did not bear thinking on. When I saw the hagraven standing outside the shack, I briefly considered my options. Briefly. Then the arrows were flying. I see it this way. There is the possibility that I may have just slaughtered my future wife. There is also the possibility that I have, instead, killed the creature that captured and ate my future wife. I would prefer to believe the latter and want no possibility of finding out that the former was true. So, by killing the hagraven without actually finding out the specifics, I can preserve my sanity. There were human bones here. It could even be the truth. The wedding ring being on the hagraven's finger is not conclusive evidence. It might have just liked the pretty rock on the ring. And I am going to stand by that interpretation, because the other... I walked as quickly from the grove as I could, heading to Windhelm to get my horse and speed this whole process along. I wasn't sure what the next horrific chapter of this 1-hour bender was, but I was tired of the whole thing, and I also now really, really want to bash Sam's face in. And I hope I get the opportunity. With my horse back under me, the trip to Whiterun took little time. I met with Isolde in the market square and returned to the ring, avoiding giving any details that I could. She just took my reluctance to speak as part of a bad relationship breakup, I think. And though she's wrong about that on so many, many levels, I am content for her to think that. It's a much better version of the events than what might have been the truth. The truth is not always something you want or need to have. The wedding was supposed to have been at Morvenska, another place I know of as an Eastmarch native. Indeed, I passed the mountainside ruin twice, getting to Witchmist and back. Odd place to plan a wedding. It's a known bandit fortress. By the time I get back there, night should have fallen. Which means there is likely to be a vampire massacre there tonight, I think. What a shame. I arrived far earlier than I needed to, and tried to determine how best to eat up about 5 hours until sunset. Trying to attack them in daylight might not be the best of ideas. As I was contemplating this, I was intercepted by a courier. The letter delivered was from the apprentice, now the owner, of the White Phial in Windhelm. He believes he's found a way to fix the broken phial, and though it is now too late for Norellian, he considers it to be a fitting tribute for his now dead master. The trick, once I went to Windhelm to speak about it in person, is that the 3 things he needs are not common items. Not surprising, given the phial's nature. 2 of them will not be overly difficult. A briar heart, which I happen to have at the museum from previous encounters. A powdered mammoth tusk. I have the tusks, just need to get one grinded down, though he tells me it needs to be in the way that giants would do it, which might be problematic. A small bit of unmelted snow from the top of the throat of the world. The material the phial was originally made of is the hardest of these. Included in his research were suggested places to look for them as well. Something to consider for later, but not at the moment. Though, if the file does what it is reputed to do, having an infinite supply of blood potions could be invaluable. I returned to the Morvenskar path and began my ascent. The sun was still high enough to be problematic, but my impatience would not allow me to wait longer, so I returned to my older methods of bow and stealth. Given that these bandits seemed to have a very healthy mage population, this ended up being a better choice. It took some hour and a half to be certain of those in the exterior, but I took only minimal damage, all of which will be repaired almost as soon as I enter the ruins themselves, and then the vampire slaughter will commence. The mages within made it more of a fight than I had expected, but that just made their blood the sweeter when I ripped it from their unwilling bodies. I wasn't sure honestly what I was looking for here, but the answer to that question became evident. On the top of a platform that was almost a throne in its presentation, a blue portal suddenly opened, beckoning to me. I was immediately suspicious of it, of course, especially at the wave of energy I could feel as it opened. I recognized it, and in that moment remembered a brief moment during the evening I had spent with Sam. I had noticed this then as well, but I'd been too drunk already to heed its warning. Now, however, that wasn't a problem, and Azira's gift gave me the name to the Daedric presence that permeated the air now. Not Sam. Sanguine, the Lord of Debauchery, which suddenly explained a great deal of the last few days. I gave up my desire to bash in his face. I didn't want to turn the Lord into an enemy, and he likely thought I was amusing at some level, or he'd not have chosen me for this little joke. A deep breath to brace myself, and I stepped through. The forest clearing I was in was disturbingly familiar, as though I had seen it in some kind of dream. This feeling was only further deepened by the fact that I somehow seemed to know which paths to walk. It wasn't a long walk, but the path was convoluted enough that I shouldn't have been able to walk directly to the clearing I found myself in without a single wrong turn, either. The clearing was the site of a party, a long-standing one I somehow knew, and since I now knew about Sanguine being behind this whole fiasco, it wasn't hard to imagine that the party had been going on for quite some time indeed. Sam stood at the head of the table and was leading the entire group in a rendition of a song that I didn't quite recognize. The tune was a familiar one, but the words were decidedly, off-color, shall we say. When he saw me, though, the song ended abruptly, and he exclaimed his happiness to see me at a volume typically reserved for trying to get people to evacuate a building that was on fire. Sam, Sanguine, explained that each of the 3 things I had done was all to help spread merriment in the world. I'm not sure how fondling holy statues, stealing a goat, and getting engaged to a hag raven was merriment, but I was smart enough to keep this to myself. Then, as if I hadn't already known, he pulled his grand reveal. After revealing himself as the Daedric Lord of Debauchery, I had only one question for him. Why me? Sanguine can be brutally honest sometimes. Let's be honest. I don't always think all of my decisions through, but you're going places. I can feel it. You, sir, are important somehow, so when that happens, why don't you just remember your old Uncle Sanguine with a small smile and not come after me or something, right? He handed me the staff he'd promised me at the beginning of this whole thing, the Sanguine Rose, and said it was mine to use as I wanted, and then, without much more time, sent me back to the real world. And I appeared back in Candlehearth Hall, as if I had never left in the first place. The time had still passed as normal, but I wonder how much of the events I went around fixing actually happened. Hopefully none of them. But those had all become secondary concerns after the Lord's words to me. "You, sir, are important somehow." Not the first time that this has been implied or stated. Azura had implied something similar only a short time ago, and it has me wondering now. What do the Daedric Lords know about me that I don't? Why should I be given their gifts, or draw their attention at all? The Daedric Lords barely notice humans at all, usually, and when someone does catch their attention directly, it is usually a bad thing for the mortal involved. I have now had the direct attention of 3 of them, and that should be very worrying. Actually, 4. Boethiah's cultists have been looking for me as well, and I can't imagine that my name was pulled from a hat at random. I sat at the inn for another hour over a drink that I left completely untouched. I made 2 decisions before I walked out of the hearth. First, I will never drink again. I cannot abide the thought that I might not be in control of my own actions again. Second, any further interactions with the Lords, and I somehow think it will not end with Boethiah, will have to be treated with the very utmost of caution. Which, honestly, is good advice anyhow.